Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Ope and I love talking about things I love and enjoy, a lot of which is books, all kinds of them. I haven't really done one of this monthly recaps in a while. I believe the last one I did was either in June or July. And although my reading volume hasn't exactly slowed down since then, I definitely enjoyed my picks for the month of September a lot, so I wanted to talk about them, especially since I actually managed to finish reading Heaven Official's Blessing, including the 7th volume that was released in early September. I'll mostly be going over the physical books I read, all of which are right here. I did read one ebook that I would like to talk about, as well as a webtoon and a BL manhwa that I read online, both of which were kind of new to me. Otherwise, everything else I read were rereads, and I will not be going over those in detail. So I started off the month by doing a 24-hour reading challenge, and yes, that means exactly what you think it does. Except for eating and other basic needs not including sleep, all I did in those 24 hours was read, and that got me through the first 3 volumes of Heaven Official's Blessing. I did film the experience, and there will be a link to it in the description if you are interested in watching that. So for the rest of the month, what I did was I just picked one of the remaining 4 volumes to read every week, and that got me through the 7th volume, which is the last volume that has been released so far. So quick recap, Volume 1 is what the first season of the donghua covers. We're introduced to the main character, Xie, who is on his 3rd ascension as a god and has become a laughingstock. And during his 3rd ascension, he made quite a bang, just like he did the other 2 times, but this time he ended up destroying a building and almost harming another god. And in order to make up for those mishaps, he needs these things called merits. But unlike other gods who are able to get their merits because of their worshippers, Xie doesn't have any worshippers. So instead, he's sent on a mission in the mortal realm to hunt down violent ghosts. And this is where he meets his love interest in the series, Sun Long, who is later revealed to be the Ghost King, Hua Chang. That's a very basic introduction to the series, but in all the other books, Xie is basically going on one mission or the other for the most part, and Hua Chang goes along with him on a lot of these missions, and they end up tying into Xielian's fall from godhood after his ascension and the subsequent trials he faced in the 800 years that passed between his 1st ascension and his 3rd ascension. I want to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, so I'll just leave that as a very simple overview of the series. But for my ratings of all the 7 books, I rated the first book in the series 3.5 stars. I feel like I enjoyed this one more because I already had way more context than I should for the series, so the setup was enjoyable for that reason. If I didn't know anything about the series, I wouldn't have rated it that highly. I didn't think it had enough of a sticky factor to keep someone who is completely new to the series interested, and that's why I rated it as a 3.5. So that's the first book. For the second book in the series, I rated that one 4.5 stars. Personally, this was the portion of the story where I got really invested in the entire series, and the reason for that is the second arc that is covered in this volume. So in the second arc, we get a flashback into Xielian's life as a mortal before his 1st ascension. It was very brutal, but also a very necessary piece. Readers got to see this very huge gap between an upright, strong, and compassionate character and the person that Xie is in the present timeline. I don't think he has necessarily lost some of those characteristics. They've just been overshadowed by a lot of pain and suffering. And in the second arc, you get a glimpse into some of that pain and suffering. Now for the 3rd book, I rated that one 4 stars. The second arc continued into about the halfway point of the 3rd book, and then the 3rd arc started and brought us back to the present timeline. I remember the second arc pretty clearly, the rest of the book not so much. This was at the tail end of my 24-hour challenge, so I was starting to get really sleepy. I do remember the Battle of the Lanterns and some introductions to characters who played very important roles in the next book, which is Book 4. Book 4, I rated 5 stars. This is my favorite of all of the 7 volumes in the series so far. I am still flabbergasted by the things that were reviewed in this book. Like throughout the series, you get these mini stories that remind you how utterly human these heavenly officials are, but the story in this book, it takes the cake. A line that I kept thinking to myself while reading was, they are gods, but they're pretty much still humans, just humans with a lot of power and authority, and a lot of them abuse that power and authority. For volume 5, I rated this one 3.75 stars. This one starts to set up the final arc that brings the entire storyline together, but I only know that because I read the other two books after it. In fact, in my review of the volume on Goodreads, I remember mentioning that it felt like a filler arc while I was reading it because it just did. The most enjoyable portion of reading this volume was how shameless Xiaolian and Hua Cheng had gotten with their PDA. Now for book 6, I rated book 6 4.5 stars. This is where shit really starts to hit the fan, and the setup in the previous book starts to make a lot more sense, and we get another flashback arc that covers more of Xiaolian's life after his first ascension. And I didn't think it was possible, but the flashback arc in this volume was worse than the first one, like way worse. And the person Xiaolian has become, let's just say, like, it starts to make a lot more sense. For the final volume, I have no words for that one. It was a 5-star read, but I have no words, and I cannot wait to read the last book. The entire story is written from Xiaolian's point of view, and I find him to be such an endearing character that you just can't help but love. I don't think you really get a chance to feel that connection with a lot of the other characters, and since they're being introduced from Xiaolian's point of view, the way they treat him will have a deep impact on how you view them as well. I love Hua Cheng because of his irrevocable devotion to Xiaolian, and I think Xiaolian really deserves someone to love him that much after losing everyone that mattered to him. I love Feng Xin as a character. Although he tried his best to hide it, you could tell that he was still very worried about Xiaolian. And on the other hand, I didn't care much for Mu Sheng because my first impression of him was someone that used Xiaolian's influence to get further, only to abandon him when things got hard. And I get it. He had his own family to take care of and didn't have a lot of options, but you also realize that he just had a vastly different way of showing that he cared. The characters that really stuck with me after Xiaolian and Hua Cheng were Xixing Chuan and Xuan Yizhen, because they were the two characters who didn't treat Xiaolian with contempt. If anything, I think they treated him with respect, and I thought they genuinely cared about him. Ling Wen was just about her job, Pei Ming was an irreconcilable man whore, and Shi Wudu was an arrogant man with unexpected layers. There are a lot of characters that add depth to the series, but these were the most notable ones I wanted to mention. Overall, it was an enjoyable series for me, and I am super excited for the second season of the Donghua. So Crunchyroll recently dropped the second trailer for season 2. I have to admit that I was a little worried that the release would get pushed back again, but seeing as they're really digging in on the promo for it, I am very optimistic that it will air this fall. So yeah, that's been Heaven Official's blessing. For the next set of books I have here, a lot of my reading has been made up of manga, manhwa, webtoons, and danmei novels in like the past 3 months. So I wanted to throw in a little bit of diversity into my reading, and in order to do that, I picked 4 books in September that didn't fall into any of those categories. One of them was an ebook, and I'll just go over that one first. The book was I Want to Die, But I Want to Eat Tteokbokki by Big Sehi. So this one is one I've had on my TBR since it got an English translation because the title intrigued me. And I got the Kindle version, I think it was for like $5. So I just bought that instead of a physical book. The title is already pretty telling, but the book is basically a therapy memoir that details the author's struggles with depression and some other harmful behaviors. In the book, she basically just takes you through her therapy sessions that show some of the things she was struggling with. Because this is someone's personal experience, I don't feel comfortable rating it. I did find the book to be a bit relatable, and in some other parts, it just educated me on how people see life differently. So it was an informative read and like a diary for the author to reflect on her growth and healing. The next book I picked was Osamu Dazai's No Longer Human. The anime Bungo Stray Dogs put me onto this book, and I added it to my TBR after the first season aired in 2016. The last season of Bungo Stray Dogs I watched was season 2, and as much as I want to catch up on the series, TV is just not doing it for me right now. There are so many things that I wanted to watch and didn't for summer anime. Like, all of my TV time has been replaced with reading and content planning, but I digress. Going back to the book, this is easily the most depressing piece of literature I have ever read. The book details the life of this character called Obayozo, starting from his early childhood into his late 20s when he died. I don't think I fully grasped the intricacies of the book, and I would definitely be doing a reread of it sometime. But Oba is basically a person who has isolated and alienated himself from humanity, so much so that he is now a clown. And a clown in the sense that he puts on this persona to try to escape from the self-imposed conviction that he cannot understand others. And in doing so, I don't think even he ever had an inkling as to who he really was. Honestly, I don't think I do either. It's the kind of book that leaves you with more questions than answers, but it was a 5-star read for me. The next book I have here is a poetry book, The Evolution of a Girl by L.E. Bowman. I found this poet thanks to the Instagram algorithm. I started following her earlier in the year and really enjoyed a lot of her poetry, so I decided to buy one of her books. The Evolution of a Girl is a collection of poetry and prose that takes you through a transformation from a girl to a woman. And the book is broken into 3 parts: the girl, the evolution, and the woman. And in each section, you can basically see how her view of herself starts to change. If I had to describe it in my own words, I'd say you see the growth from uncertainty as a girl to a sense of self-assuredness as a woman that comes with understanding and loving yourself. I really enjoyed reading this one, and it's another 5-star read for me. I plan to have it on hand and just go back to some pieces in it every now and then that are really good pieces to just kind of sit with and have a moment of introspection. So I'm really looking forward to that. My last pick for diversity was The Red Palace by Hoju Un. This is another author that I found thanks to the Instagram algorithm. And I bought the book because a lot of her books give Korean drama vibes, and I decided that since I haven't been watching a lot of them, I should read something that can easily be adapted into either a Korean drama or a movie. I, however, have unfortunately not finished reading this one. The last week in September was not the best week for me reading-wise. I had a lot of planning and reorganization to do around my apartment, so I prioritized those things, and reading took a little bit of a backseat. I do plan to read it at least by the end of the first week of October. The book is set in Joseon in 1758 and follows the story of a young girl called Hyun who entered the palace as a palace nurse. So Hyun is the illegitimate daughter of a man with a pretty decent ranking for that time, but her relationship with her father is pretty much non-existent. In fact, I got the feeling that it was one of those situations where people know who you are, but they just kind of don't talk about it. And she's hell-bent on being nothing like her mom, who is basically waiting on a man who probably never loved her back. And all of that drives her to make something of herself as a nurse, but she is suddenly thrust into the dark world of court politics when 4 girls are murdered one night and her mentor becomes the prime suspect for the murders. Hyun is convinced that her mentor has been wrongly accused, and she launches her own secret investigation to prove her innocence, which is how she encounters her love interest in the book, a young police inspector called Ojin. I'm only about 50 pages into the book, so I don't have much more to say about this one. And that wraps up this set of books. The last set of physical books I have here is manga. So I have volumes 1 through 3. Of the manga Punch. I read volume 1, I want to say maybe like 2 months ago, but I found volumes 2 and 3 in my local used bookstore recently for a really good price. And now that I think about it, I found the first volume on World of Books used as well. So all 3 of these are used, and this is the complete series. It has just these 3 volumes. I thought it was pretty short, so I wanted to pick them up. This was, I think, it's a pretty old shoujo series. It came out in the early 2000s, around like 2005, 2006. So it does have that like comic style, slapstick comedy kind of style that was really popular back then. So the series follows the story of this girl called Elle. I had to look because I couldn't remember. But she basically comes from a family of martial artists, but she does not want anything to do with martial arts. Now that I think about it, her parents weren't really mentioned in the story, but she lived with her grandfather throughout the series, and her father owns a martial arts dojo, actually just a boxing dojo, and he has athletes that work out at that dojo. Her grandfather has also betrothed her to his friend's grandson. his friend has passed away, and his reasoning behind betrothing her to this man is the fact that he and his friend really liked each other and they wanted their grandkids to get together. And in my head, I'm just thinking, well, if you and your friend liked each other that much, why didn't the two of you get together? Why are you dragging your grandkids into this? But long story short, Elle was not interested in this betrothal. The man that her grandfather wanted her to marry, her fiance, I believe his name was Rio. Let me make sure I'm getting this correctly. This is him, by the way. Her reason behind it wasn't because it wasn't attractive. She just couldn't see him as someone who was going to be a romantic interest for her. His name was... There are no names on the back of the book. I'm just going to assume that I got that correct. And his name is Rio. His name was Rio, and she didn't want anything to do with him. And in order to get out of this situation where she is basically engaged to a man that she doesn't want to marry, she lies that she's dating someone else when she meets him on the road. And that someone else is the guy on the second cover. On the first cover, wow, I'm all over the place, whose name I also cannot remember. Let me actually look through the back of one of these and see if I can remember. If I can see it, I mean Kazuki. His name is Kazuki. So she lies that Kazuki is her boyfriend, and because she is in love with Kazuki and dating him, she cannot marry her fiance. Kazuki gets wind of Elle's lie, and he takes her seriously and thinks that she's actually in love with him, and that throws the both of them into contact with each other. And the ironic thing is that Kazuki actually ends up becoming a boxer at her grandfather's dojo, and well, they fall in love with each other, they get together and whatnot. I will rate the series 3.5 stars. Like I said earlier, it has like that comical slapstick comedy vibe that a lot of 2000s shoujo had. It was enjoyable because it was short. Otherwise, there were some problems that I had with the series. Her fiance, Ryo, he did some pretty terrible things, all in the name of getting Elle back. And those things were never addressed, never really took responsibility for them. Every other character in the series just kind of pretended like those things didn't happen. And I struggled with that a little bit. I actually think 3.5 might be too high of a rating for this. I wouldn't recommend for anyone to read this unless you're like really bored and you just want something short and quick to read. Otherwise, I wouldn't lose any sleep trying to add this to your TBR or anything. If you have like an hour and you don't have anything to read and you just want to get through something to read in that 1 hour, pick it up because it's a short series. Otherwise, don't waste your time. The other manga that I read was Lovesick Ellie, and I dropped the first volume of it earlier, so I'm going to pick that up from the floor and I'm going to get out of the screen for a little bit. But I read the first volume of Lovesick Ellie, so I picked the first volume up during the Right Stuff birthday sale earlier in the year. I picked it up because, so this series got completed in 2020. It started getting printed, I believe it was early last year, and the final volume in the series, volume 12, is going to come out on the 3rd of October in print. The series is already completed, so there is a digital version of the 12th volume in English, but the printed version doesn't come out until the 3rd of October. So I'm like, well, this is another really short series. I'm just going to pick up the first couple of volumes, see if I like it, and because it's short, it should be a pretty good one to add to my collection. I wasn't really expecting much from the series, but I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I was expecting. The characters were very endearing. So this is a high school romance shoujo. It's about this girl called Eriko Ichimura. I believe her name is Eriko Ichimura. Yes, Eriko Ichimura, and she's described as a girl who is so boring that no one remembers that she exists. I'm laughing because like a lot of shoujo manga usually have this trope, but she's described as a girl who's so boring that no one remembers she exists. But Eriko has another life online as Lovesick Ellie, where she's basically sharing like these very perverted tweets. I don't know, when I think about it, I think of it as tweets, but she's sharing these very perverted tweets about a really popular guy in her high school whose name is Omi. And That online personality that she has quite the viral following, and one day she runs into Omi, she mistakenly drops her phone, he finds out about her personality online, but before she dropped her phone, she also found out that popular guy Omi is also a bit of a two-faced boy because he looks perfect and just handsome, kind to everyone, but he is not really that person. He sometimes loses his cool. He can be a little bit of a tsundere and just little things like that. And their interactions with each other, like throughout the first volume, and then one other character that was introduced that became Elle's first friend at school. I just found all of them to be so endearing. So I cannot wait to read the rest of this series. I'll rate this first volume a 4.5 star because of the shock factor. I'm not going to rate it a full 5 because it's just the first volume in a series that has 12 volumes, but I really did enjoy it. And something that I've been struggling to do ever since I started picking up physical volumes of manga is when I read the first couple of volumes physically, I find it hard to try to continue the series online. So even though I say that I enjoyed this more than I expected to, I haven't followed up on reading the rest of the series. I think I'm going to try to pick up the next 2 volumes, see if I'm still enjoying it. And then from there, I'll decide if I want to keep reading it online or collect the rest of the 9 volumes in the series. So that's what I read for manga. The last set of things I read are ongoing series I read online, a webtoon, and some BL manhwas by the author Upi. I'll start with the webtoon titled I Thought My Time Was Up. This series is set in a world with magic, and the main character, Lariat Blanche, goes to visit a doctor one day because she's feeling ill, only to live with the diagnosis of a really rare disease, and the doctor basically tells her that she has only 3 months left to live. So she's distraught at first, but eventually she gets it together and makes a bucket list of things she would like to accomplish in those 3 months and starts to take action towards them. But like the title of the series suggests, she only thought her time was up, but it really wasn't. The diagnosis she got from the doctor was wrong, but she has already implemented so many changes in her life with death in mind, and she will have to decide how to move forward with another drastic change in her life because she's not going to die. This was a really fun read. It's an ongoing series with 39 chapters on Webtoon, 12 of which are Fast Pass chapters. A Fast Pass basically means you have to pay for those chapters, but the first 27 chapters in the series are free, and subsequent chapters become available for free every week. So it's to be like waiting for weekly updates in the series. This webtoon has really eye-pleasing art, and Lariat is a fun main character. I enjoyed every single second of reading this, and I cannot wait to see where the rest of the story goes. And because it was really entertaining to read, I'll rate this one 4 stars. The last series I want to go over is The Pizza Delivery Man and the Gold Palace. This is an ongoing BL manhwa by the author Upi. I'll rate this series 5 stars, even though it's not complete yet, because unlike a lot of BL manhwa that you see these days that tend to focus on a lot of smut, toxic relationships, and misunderstanding to kind of forward their plot, this author chooses to cover complex topics like mental health and the struggles of just getting through everyday life in their works. I read some of their other completed works, and the theme was pretty much the same. Some were smuttier than others, but they all have this very satisfying feeling of seeing someone who is struggling through life and tired of living overcome those hard times and eventually get to a point where their life feels like one that's worth living. I'll recommend all of the author's works if you want something just a little bit different in your BL manhwa, maybe like a little bit more depth. The Pizza Delivery Man and the Goat Palace is about Woo-won, a pizza delivery guy who is pretty much down on his luck. He works part-time just to support himself. He's also paying off his ailing mother's medical expenses while also trying to pay off the debt that his father left both him and his mom in. The other main character, So-an, is in a different place financially. He's a wealthy man, but he suffers from panic attacks and social phobia. They get thrown into contact with each other when Woo-won starts delivering pizza to the apartment where So-an lives, called the Goat Palace. And So-an notices that although he usually struggles with meeting new people, he feels really comfortable around Woo-won, so his therapist encourages him to pursue a friendship with Woo-won. But it becomes so much more for the both of them, and they start to find comfort in each other. This was a bit of an emotional read, and there were parts of the story that brought tears to my eyes, but I loved every single moment of reading it. The series is not focused solely on depressing moments. There are some cute and funny moments, and I get the feeling that this is definitely about to become one of my favorite BL manhwas. The other things I read were rereads, like I mentioned. I reread the BL manhwa BJ Alex twice in September because I have a problem. I also reread the manhwa Positively Yours. My other rereads were yaoi manga. I reread Punch Up and all of the mangaka Kanda Oneka's works. Like sometimes I just like going back to stuff that are guaranteed good read. And yeah, that pretty much wraps up my month of reading. Whatever day you find yourself watching this, make it a great one, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!